Changing gears here, guys. We're talking about samples and studies and populations and types of samples and all that jazz. Sorry I couldn't be here today in class, but I'm going to tell you right now, you can continue to listen to this video, or you can just simply go through the textbook in Chapter 12, Lesson 1, and read through their examples, because you're going to get, I mean, this is exact, it's right out of your textbook. So if you would rather just do that, you can. I'm going to go through it quickly just to kind of give you an idea, but feel free to double check with your textbook as well. Okay, so sampling. In this chapter, we're going to do all sorts of talking about data, talking about statistics and stuff. So very, very first lesson, we're talking about what a population is. So if I'm taking a sample of a population, you know, it depends, your population isn't everybody in the world. Sometimes if you're asking a specific question or you want to know something about a specific set of people, your population is just that set of people. So for example, if you wanted to know, you know, what is the most popular school sport in the 7th grade, your population is 7th graders, not the whole middle school, 7th graders. Or maybe you do want the whole middle school, so your population is the middle school. Okay, now most oftentimes, like it says in here, a population is going to be way too big to actually have every single member in that population do the sample or be in the sample. So they take a sample, which is a subset. Now there's many different ways to take a sample, and it's very difficult, by the way, to get a random sample. Okay, it's very difficult. There's 4 types that we're going to talk about right here. So a systematic sample, that means members are selected according to a specific interval. So starting at a starting point, and then this example, so from a starting point, a random starting point, you pick that person and then every 3rd student. That would be a systematic. There's a system to picking a person. It's usually an interval form. Okay, so self-selected sample, now that would be when they volunteer. A lot of times you will send a form home and you don't expect to hear back from everybody. You're only going to hear back from the people who volunteer the information and want to be included in the sample. So that's a type of sample. Any sort of volunteer response is going to be a self-selected sample, meaning the person who's in the sample selected themselves to be in the sample. Okay, then this one, a convenient sample. This is probably the most popular type of sample in real life, because that's when members are picked based on availability. You know, maybe we have to have the survey done by next block, so who do we ask? 3rd block kids, and there you go. Okay, so it's a convenient sample, or you're only in one spot, or you're picking people who are easily accessible or easy to reach. Okay, that's convenience. Definitely, very rarely is that going to be unbiased, all right, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now, a stratified sample. This one's interesting. That's where you take the population and you divide it into smaller groups. The key here is non-overlapping groups. Okay, so I can't say blue-eyed people and right-handed people, because there might be some people that are both of that. So their example is a really good example. So if you want to take a survey of the high school, but you're trying to find a sample, you're going to develop, you know, freshmen, a group of sophomores, a group of seniors and juniors, and then you take a random selection from each of those groups. Okay, that's stratified. Stratified. So there's a strategy involved to selecting random people. Okay, so first type of problems, or almost all of your problems really, they're going to give you a situation. You're going to identify what the sample is and what the population is, and then you're going to classify their sample as simple, systematic, self-selected, convenience, or stratified. Okay, so a high school civics teacher wants to know if the student body would approve of a new ruling requiring all students to wear identification badges at all times. This teacher surveys the students that have 1st and 8th grade study hall. So his sample are 1st and 8th study hall students. His population, the entire student body. Now, we don't know what that means. This could be, high school, but, the entire student body, freshman through senior, okay? So classify this as a simple, a systematic, self-selected, convenience, or stratified. And did we all figure that out yet? It is very much a convenience. He's just, because he's polling the people, students in first and eighth period only. Probably because you don't have to teach a class, it's a study hall, they're all there. So convenience, definitely. Okay, flip that paper over. Here's another example problem. All right, zoo animals. Animals at a zoo are divided by species. Then 2 animals are selected at random from each group to have their blood tested. Identify the sample. Okay, the sample is 2 from each species. Okay, and the population, all zoo animals. Classify it as simple, systematic, self-selected, convenience, or stratified. Well, it's definitely not self-selected. They're not volunteering because they're animals. Okay, so which one would this be? They are divided by species first and then select 2 selected at random. That is definitely stratified, because they are divided first into non-overlapping and then selected out 2 randoms. Okay, here's where we're going to talk about bias. We haven't talked about bias yet, but here's where we're going to talk about bias. Okay, it's hard to get a sample that is not going to be a bias. So that just means there's probably going to be an error in the results. It's a misrepresentation of the population. If the sample favors one conclusion over another, then the sample is biased and the data are invalid. Then you can't use them. They're not going to be a very good representation of your entire population. Okay, so let's look at this. We are going to just identify them. We don't care what strategy or what type of sample it is. We are simply basing it on unbiased or biased. Okay, so every 5th person coming into a grocery store is asked to name their favorite radio station. Unbiased or biased? I would say this one is unbiased. Because, just about everybody goes to a grocery store, so not favoring any specific group. Okay, take a look at B. B says every 5th person, so P.S. it's also not stratified, systematic, but every 5th person at the country music showcase is asked to name their favorite radio station. That is very much bias, because people at that location would definitely have a preference. And that opinion would not represent an entire population. If your population was country music fans, then that works. But I'm assuming that you want all people, all genres represented, which would not be the case. Okay? So take a look at the next page. There are 3 types of studies that you can use that they do. They selected information. So you can do it with a survey. So basically, you given samples, you get responses. Maybe you're taking responses of characteristics, behaviors, opinions, but it is responses given by a sample. Okay, here's an example. To determine whether the student body is happy with the spring dance theme, they asked the sample for their opinion. Okay, that's a survey. Observational study is when something is measured or observed without affecting the study at all. So they basically without knowing. Okay, it doesn't have an effect on your actual population or your sample. Okay, so take a look at their example. A gaming company watches a group of teens play a selection of video games and notes the ones that play the most. So you're just watching. You're not asking them, you're not encouraging them, you're not asking them to do something specific, you're just simply observing something, okay? Observational study. An experiment is when they set something up. The thing about experiments is that, and this is the thing we tend to forget, we'd like to run experiments all the time, but you can't measure how effective a specific thing is if you don't have a control group. So you have to have two groups. You have to have the experimental group, which undergoes whatever it is you're trying to study, whatever change you're trying to evaluate, and then a control group that doesn't have the change. And then you compare them. Okay, here's an example. A teacher administers a paper and pencil test to one of two algebra classes. He administers a computer-based test that covers the same material to the other class, and the teacher compares the scores and the completion times. So you have the control group that's still getting the paper and pencil test, and then you have the experimental group that is doing it on computer. All right? So let's look at these examples. All they're asking us to do is determine if it's a survey, an observational study, or an experiment, and explain. Management of a restaurant wants to solicit the opinions of their customers regarding several aspects of their dining experience. They distribute questionnaires to all guests to voluntarily complete at the end of their meals. Okay, that is definitely a survey. Collecting responses. Okay, not asking if it's biased, I'm just asking what one it was, okay, which one it was. In this one, it's a survey. All right, and B, a fitness instructor randomly selects half their clients and gives them the freedom to develop their own fitness programs. And for the remaining clients, the instructor develops their fitness program in line with her current guidelines. And after 2 months, she records and analyzes any progress achieved by the clients in both groups. That is very much an experiment. Because you have two groups. One controlled, meaning not changed, and one changed. Very good. Okay, so when can a survey can actually introduce bias? There's ways it can be confusing. If it's confusing, it might be biased. It can encourage members of the sample to answer a certain way. That can cause a strong reaction, or it can address more than one issue at a time. If any one of those things happens within your data collection, then you can be assured that it's going to be a biased sample. Okay, so let's turn back to this page and let's talk about this. Are they biased? Identify if they're biased or unbiased, and if biased, explain your reasoning. What's your favorite movie genre? And who is your favorite actress? Okay? If they would have stopped here, that would have been unbiased. But because they're talking about, what does it say? More than one, addresses more than one issue. So this is biased. More than one issue. Okay, do you prefer to drive or fly when you travel? That one would be unbiased. Unless, of course, you're asking at an airport, okay? So that would be unbiased. If your favorite, I think it's supposed to be is your favorite ice cream flavor plain vanilla or delicious chocolate? Well, first of all, it limits it to vanilla and chocolate. And did anybody notice this? Plain vanilla or delicious chocolate. Okay, that one's definitely a bias because it is trying to encourage, because of the unfair adjectives that they use. Okay, so it is biased. Okay, it's biased because it's encouraging a certain response and it's limiting to 2 options. That's an and, sorry, and. What types of reading materials do you enjoy? That would be unbiased. Okay, I'm going to probably stop here because I think you're okay. I'm not going to do this last one. You could look at it and you can explain your reasoning. But your assignment is going to be both of these. Now, I know it's a lot, but this probably isn't going to take you very long. Okay, so this front page is 13 through 30 all, and then on the back side, it's doing the same thing. It's doing the same thing. 1, 2, and 3, you're talking about your sample size, your population, classify what it is. They give you all the options up there. And then biased or unbiased, and always make sure you're explaining. Okay, so that goes through the same inside there. When you're done, or if you finish, then please go ahead and continue working in Alex. And I will see you on Monday, hopefully. Thanks. Bye.